This time, Curbishley's Charlton Dynasty.
No nay never, no more, 'cause I'll stay a wild rover forever and more.
Hello and welcome to By Far the Greatest Team, a podcast in which football fans attempt the impossible to rank once and for all who is the greatest team of all time. My name's Graham Dunn, making the case for Oxford United, wherever it belongs, and joining me as ever, King of the Data, Jamie Rooney.
Hey, Graham. You know, I wonder if we're going to find out over the next 90 minutes or so whether Alan Curbishley's Charlton Dynasty has the same amount of drama as the US drama dynasty from the 1980s. And does it have the same volume of shoulder pads and the cliffhangers and people coming back from the dead? Or was that Dallas? I forget. I get my US soap operas mixed up.
Yeah, I think Dallas was coming back from the dead. Dynasty, I think didn't Fallon get taken off in a spaceship at the end? Wasn't that the final?
That happened to Bert in soap. Bert got abducted by aliens in soap as well.
Oh, he did. Oh, yes, he was. I forgot about that.
And then a different Bert came down that tried to be like Bert, but wasn't like Bert. Oh.
This is excellent. Yes, that was your summer. Watching, wasn't it? Old episodes of Soap, which you've done extraordinarily well to find.
Yeah, it's all on YouTube. Fantastic. I'll watch it again tomorrow. Well, I can't watch it again tomorrow. It takes about 6 months to watch all of the episodes.
A forgotten classic. Soap. I loved Soap.
I'm with you, Stu. I'm with you. Yeah. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So those are the dulcet tones of this week's guest. So we're going to be talking about Charlton Athletic and Alan Curbishley, and we're going to our resident London team specialist. Although, so Stuart Burgess, but Stu, I think you probably could do teams outside of London.
Occasionally, I can stray outside the M25 if absolutely necessary. But I kind of like being described as the London football correspondent. That's I think quite flattering, really. But yeah, happy to talk about whatever you want me to talk about, guys. And it's great to see you both, and it's great to be invited back.
And Charlton are a funny team, aren't they? I think, and I'm sure there are obviously rivalries. I think probably for Crystal Palace more than anyone, especially during this period. But generally, I think it's difficult to dislike Charlton, isn't it?
I think Millwall fans would disagree with you. There's not a lot of love lost between Charlton and Millwall fans. I think simply because of the geographical proximity, and also because I think historically they have spent quite a lot of time in the same divisions. Certainly post Charlton's, post-war spell in the top flight, both Millwall and Charlton kind of kicked around the second and third divisions for quite a long time. So I think there is a bit of rivalry there. And as you say with Palace, I mean, they obviously shared the ground with Palace for a period of time. So
it is interesting because Charlton, I think, a bit like as we discussed on the Millwall pod, was that Millwall had been, well, I thought of them as a top flight side for ages. They hadn't been. And actually before this kind of period, Charlton actually, their previous sort of 20, 30 years or so, is a little bit skulking around in the lower divisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's kind of the Curbishley era which we're going to talk about was, I think, Charlton's best spell since kind of the immediate post-war years, and certainly the longest sustained period in the top flight. Though they did have a brief sort of flirtation with Division 1, as it was back then in the late 80s under Lenny Lawrence, which coincided with them going bankrupt and having to move out of the valley. So it's a bit of a sort of strange combination of financial collapse, but actually relative success on the pitch.
Whenever I think about Charlton, the bit that I struggle to believe, it feels like it's a fever dream. There's this period which may be related to why Charlton had to move out of the valley because they're in financial ruin. But it feels like a fever dream that they signed Alan Stevenson, which just seemed the most extraordinary signing.
Yeah, Absolutely extraordinary. A club with no money and no ground, and signing at that time was probably Denmark's most famous player, I guess, wasn't it?
Jamie, he was a Ballon d'Or winner, wasn't he?
Yeah, he won the Ballon d'Or with Borussia Mönchengladbach, I think in 77, 78, signed for Charlton in 82, 83, and he came for Barcelona. I think he was disillusioned with life in Spain and wanted to move somewhere where the food and the weather was a lot better.
Crikey.
Simonson left when they could only, you had the 2 overseas players limit in Spain, and they had Bernd Schuster and they signed Maradona. So, okay, that you're probably not going to get much game time. But it did sort of feel, when I've heard him I read a couple of interviews, and it just seemed like I just wanted to go somewhere where no one knew who I was. And I think he was probably, you'd probably view it in today's world as, I think he was having some kind of breakdown, probably.
But I mean, if you want to go where not many people are going to turn up and see you, then Charlton's not a bad place, is it really? I mean, they used to have players that were on the witness protection scheme used to go and sign for Charlton. I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be neutral.
You're talking them up.
My Millwall kind of background is coming through. I'll rescind those comments. Apologies.
So yes, they did end up. They massively, oddly, I think they were second tier at the time, signing a Ballon d'Or winner, Alan Simonson, who was quite successful. He scores, I think, 9 in 16 games for them. But they can't afford to pay him. He heads off back to Denmark, and this is a club that financially is just all over the place. And as you say, that kind of Lenny Lawrence somehow gets them up, despite all those financial challenges, and despite not having a home ground to play at.
Yeah, he got them up, and they stayed in the top flight for 4 seasons, I think it was. 3 or 4 seasons. Kind of generally around the sort of relegation fight. 1987, they took part in one of the short-lived playoffs where the side immediately outside the relegation zone in the Premier League or First Division would play against the 3 sides outside the promotion in the Second Division as was and Championship as is, and they survived on through one of those, and they beat Leeds in a replay. So it was 2 legs. So it kind of it's nothing like the playoffs is now, where it's this massive, kind of money generating event. It was 2 legs, one at each ground, and then because it was equal after those, they had a replay at a neutral ground, and Charlton won, so remained in the top flight, which is, and I think that only lasted 2 seasons. That system. They then reverted to the system that they've got now, which is obviously just the second flight teams playing against each other.
I'm not sure when they decided, actually, we shouldn't be including the 4th bottom Premier League side in that, or what the thinking and the logic was. But it's a real shame because, of course, had it been happening this time, Spurs would be now coming off their glorious celebrations and would be lining up against Sunderland.
That's a nice thought, isn't it? That is a nice thought. I kind of suspect it was the fact that the Premier League or the top flight just became more and more powerful, and putting one more team at jeopardy of dropping out really didn't sit with their overall ethos, did it? So that disappeared. But it was kind of interesting, wasn't it? And I think Chelsea the following season actually went down as the 4th bottom team. I think they lost in the playoff system and went down. So there was some, there was definitely an upside to it.
Yeah, definitely. There is that system is used throughout European football as well. So they still have. I think in Scotland they do it. I'm sure in Scotland there's a couple of leagues where one of the teams that finishes in the lower spots plays one of the teams that's coming up from the division as a playoff.
But you mentioned Sunderland. Sunderland lost to Swindon in the first Wembley one, but didn't Sunderland subsequently get promoted because Swindon got docked for financial irregularities?
Knowledge, Stu. That's why we got him on, Graham. He's got
Really
Yeah.
happy memory, that one.
Yeah, Graham remembers that quite well, I can imagine. He went from sadness to delight in a legal decision. I think it was 2 leagues as well. They got demoted.
Mm.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they did. They got dropped down to the 3rd flight, didn't they?
And given the financial mismanagement we've seen since, they were quite unlucky in hindsight.
Yeah.
So this and it's a massive era when you look at Curbishley's Charlton period. And what's sort of notable about this is it's quite difficult, where there are some things you can pin it down on, but actually it's the remarkable stability, stroke, almost blandness of this period. Under this period, or throughout this period, Charlton become a really solid outfit, get some stability. But the whole thing begins with one of the lesser seen dual joint managers in football. So Curbishley takes the job as joint player manager with Steve Gritt, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Curbishley is a kind of a West Ham legend as a player, whereas Steve Gritt has this long heritage at Charlton. But it's absolutely left field to choose to go for joint managers.
Curbishley played for Charlton in the mid-'80s, and then he left and went to Brighton. And then he came back in 1990 as player coach under Lenny Lawrence. So there was obviously some thought of bringing him through the ranks. Quite how Steve Gritt got the job, I don't know, apart from, as you say, long association with the club. I don't remember at any point there being a joint manager sort of scenario before that. Liverpool went for it briefly, didn't they? Was it Roy Evans and Houllier?
Evans and Houllier, yeah. They looked quite confused on the pitch in the empty Anfield Stadium.
Yeah.
Almost like they hadn't had the discussion who was actually going to be the decision maker.
Yeah, you kind of got the impression that Evans' days were numbered and they were just trying to soften the blow a bit by bringing those. Roy sitting there on the bench and then looks to his right and there's this French bloke. What's going on? But yeah, I don't remember many other joint managerships.
No.
Millwall did have Keith Stevens and Alan McCleary for a bit as joint managers. And that worked okay, really, but then they got rid of both of them and brought in Mark McGee. And I think that was a sort of short-term measure that worked, and so they just let it be for a while. And I don't know whether that was the same with Curbishley and Gritt, to be honest. I haven't really looked into that. But and also, I don't know why Gritt left. Because he was there for 3 or 4 years, wasn't he?
Yeah, 3 or 4 years. So they had they actually had quite a successful first season in charge. So they just missed out on the playoffs. I think they finished 7th that year. But it is interesting that I think it is the longest sustained joint managerness. Is that a phrase? That there is. So they're there because they're together for sort of 3-4 years, and
yeah.
I did read an interview with Steve Gritt, and he didn't really go into the details beyond they just thought one person should be doing it, which probably does make sense.
There was, I think Ray Clemens and Doug Livermore in the early 1990s as well. I think they had a short spell at Tottenham, but it is a rare thing. And I kind of like the idea that it brings out a whole level of confusion to the song "You're Getting Sacked in the Morning."
Yeah.
Just deflect the responsibility onto the other fella. Well, they're not singing it about me.
One of the only other examples I could find, but it's quite similar to the Millwall example where of Stevens and McCleary, because Bolton, after Bruce Rioch leaves, they bring in Roy McFarlane to assist. I think Colin Todd was already there, similar to the. But I think the logic was, we've already got Colin Todd there. Roy McFarlane's the manager. They were fantastic as a defensive combination.
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
Yeah.
Well, as it turns out, 2 wins in 28.
It did go wrong, yeah.
Quite a lot.
Yeah.
There's obviously something about trying to team kind of partners together in some way or combinations. And so you could see how the Millwall combination, that would work up to a point.
I'm a bit old school. There has to be a hierarchy, doesn't there? So the buck has to stop with an individual. But you get, combinations like Clough and Taylor is an obvious one. And I can't think of any others off the top of my head, but you get, that kind of, number one, number two. And you get professional assistant managers, don't you? So like Brian Kidd, Brian Kidd was, number two to Ferguson and number two to, various other people. Had a brief spell as number one at Blackburn and got relegated. So clearly, that shows where his abilities lie. But actually having two managers, you're right. It's going to lead to confusion, isn't it?
I think it might have been Bolton. The Bolton example is one of the ones I've seen where at the moment Farland went, they immediately switched from 4 to 5 at the back.
Right.
This kind of there really was something quite fundamental.
Yeah.
The managers really weren't seeing eye to eye on this.
Yeah. But then you get that where, the manager is sacked and the assistant manager steps up as caretaker and changes everything. Yeah. And you kind of think, well, why were you subscribing to the previous system if you want to, you're just there as a sort of as a JD Vance figure tugging your foot off,
Tell you what, though, it's got to be the worst job in football, the Premier League caretaker manager. And I can't think of any caretaker manager that's lasted a sustained period of time. And then not only do they end up losing their caretaker role, they end up losing their job when the new guy comes in.
Yeah.
It seems to be a thankless position. It's like, I don't want to be the caretaker.
It is a poison chalice, isn't it? Yeah,
totally.
Didn't Craig Shakespeare end up doing really well at Leicester as the caretaker?
Yeah, he did.
And then he got the job. And of course, maybe there's a team not a million miles away from one that you follow, Jamie, who gave Solskjaer the job.
Yeah. So
those first 2 or 3 years under Curbishley, so they're back in the second tier at this point, and after sort of flirting with the playoffs, they kind of they're sort of not pulling up any trees there in the middle of it, but they do. Some of these building blocks are starting to come back because they get back. I think it's 1990 or 92. They get back to 1992, isn't it? They get back to the Valley, which is clearly a massive turning point club because they've been away 6-7 years, I think.
It was post Bradford, wasn't it? So it was 85, 86. I think the Valley was declared unsafe, as a lot of grounds were in the post, Bradford City scenario. And I never went to the Valley in its old days, but it was just a massive terrace, wasn't it? And the terrace had some ludicrous capacity, 20,000, possibly even more than that, could stand on the terrace. And, unsurprisingly, they decided that wasn't particularly safe. So, I think you're right. I think they were away for about 6 years and they went back in 92. I think you're right, Graham, yeah.
Yeah, 1936, the Valley, 68,000 versus Arsenal. That was the crowd. Incredible, wasn't it, really?
Yeah.
But it is weird when these football... I kind of understand it because obviously if Charlton had been playing in the top league, they're carrying a different profile. But, at the same time that Charlton Stadium was declared unfit for the top league, I remember Wolverhampton Wanderers at Molineux playing with 2 stands because 2 stands were closed down completely. So it really was a sign of the times. I mean, there were so many football grounds in disrepair. Old Trafford was an absolute stake through the 80s as well. And you got these, horrible fences as well. And as we learned from the Chelsea pod last week, Graham, Ken Bates said put electric fences in. Unfortunately, he wasn't allowed to turn them on, as Lyndon let us know.
It's a weird period actually where you do have these kind of homeless clubs. So of course, it's a fraction after this, isn't it? But you have Wimbledon being able to play on lane. So I mean, Selhurst Park sort of became everyone's second ground.
It was essentially the Airbnb of its day, wasn't it? And they must have made some good money out of it, mustn't they? Because I mean, for a period of probably 10 years, they had someone else, another club, sharing their ground and presumably paying for the privilege. So
it's a perfect revenue generator, really, isn't it? As part of that, there was quite there's a big groundswell of support for getting back to the Valley, and I think what's seen as one of the turning points was the 1990 local elections, I think it was, where the Return to the Valley party had been established and got 11% of the vote.
Really?
Yeah. And arguably, given what we've seen over the years, maybe we could have done much worse.
Yeah.
So Charlton returned to their spiritual home, and as you say, Stu, they get to 1995. They, after 4 years with the joint managers of Steve Gritt and Alan Curbishley, they do make they cull Steve Gritt for no reasons we can't which nothing other than I think that they wanted a single manager, and Alan Curbishley takes sole charge, and actually the decision appears to it definitely does work. In that first season they make the playoffs. I think of all teams, I think they lose to Crystal Palace. It does seem to be quite a lot of Palace do keep coming up in this Charlton story.
Yeah.
Again, they have another year off, and then we get to the 1997 season, by which time Sir Curbishley has already been at Charlton either as joint or sole manager for 6-7 years. He's already, it's actually a massive, by today's standards, it's a huge rate.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind that Lenny Lawrence had been there, I think, in charge for like 9-10 years beforehand. There is a patience at this club now.
Yeah, I mean, continuity. I think Lenny Lawrence started in 1982 and left in 91. And then Curbishley ran from 91 to 2006. So that's 24 years. They only had 2 managers, which is unbelievable, isn't it, really? The season after Curbishley left, they had 3 managers in one season. So that kind of tells its own story, doesn't it, really?
I mean, if you really want to bring up to date as well, both Tottenham and Chelsea, that have been in the Premier League for 33 years, have both had 28 managers in that duration as well.
Yeah.
It shows you how clubs can change things quite regularly.
Yeah.
And over this period, that's 24-year period, and Charlton are relegated, 2 times in that period. They have a playoff challenge, and they have a bit of an ordinary season. There is a newfound stability at this club, which I think sort of maybe there's something about Curbishley's demeanour that kind of helps do that. I mean, he always came across very level-headed, didn't he?
He seems to have been a manager that could relate to the players very well, and the players responded to him. I only came across one incident of a player who apparently didn't get on with Curbishley, and that player was actually at the club for 7 years under Curbishley. So obviously, whatever differences they had weren't that bad, And he came across as a sort of level-headed guy, and I think that Lenny Lawrence before him had come across quite similarly. I mean, I don't know if you remember Lenny Lawrence so well, but he always came across well. Apart from, I actually stood behind him in a queue for coffee at Costa Coffee in Marylebone Station about 20 plus years ago, and I think at the time he'd gone way past the Charlton Middlesbrough era, and I think he was managing Grimsby, and he was getting quite agitated, which I found surprising because I thought, as you say, he was a sort of typical, level-headed, cool in a crisis fella, but he was getting quite agitated because I think his train was due, and the people in Costa were taking a bit of time to prepare his mocker. But there you go. That's just an anecdotal incident. I'm sure he was similar to Curbishley, very level-headed and easygoing chap.
I think we've got empirical evidence there. I think we can put that.
Yeah.
Maybe plug that into the data matrix.
I personally have suffered a few anxiety attacks in Costa Coffee, so I can relate completely.
Should we say other coffee brands are available at this point?
You're absolutely right about Curbishley. He was relatable, wasn't he? He was always relatable. Whenever he did his media stuff and when he spoke, there was reason behind everything that he said. You could relate to what he was saying, how he was saying it, and he was likable. So you could see why he could establish quite a longevity at Charlton with the players he was working with, because I think he just had that touch about him that you're going to get on with him. He just has those qualities.
I think it's also worth saying that probably ties in with bringing on youngsters as well, which throughout this period, in fairness, if you manage a team for 15 years, you are going to find some homegrown talents and whatever. But Charlton did keep producing youngsters that kept coming through, and I think that was really one of Curbishley's talents, was bringing players through. And in that season, I just mentioned, the League Bowyer had been the star of the show, and I think actually Charlton were still a selling club. So Bowyer was sold at the end of that first playoff campaign. That was the model they were following, and pretty much throughout. Even when you get to his last season, probably the most successful season, they've got Scott Parker, but Scott Parker gets sold as well. Probably throughout this reign, you do have this one step forward, one step back kind of thing, but the club just gets more and more secure.
And also you had consistency at the boardroom, I think, didn't you? Because Richard Murray was chairman.
Yeah.
I think he sort of stepped back a couple of times, but he was a pretty consistent figure throughout the 90s and early 2000s, and I think that obviously helps. And he was an advocate of Curbishley, and therefore that kind of just wound its way through. I mean, you're saying about bringing players through, Graham. I actually, not disagreeing with you, but I was surprised by how few players came through the ranks at Charlton in that Premier League period that they had from 2000 to 2007. There weren't many, I didn't think, that came through. Lee Bowyer obviously, came through and moved on. Parker, another one. But in terms of players that stayed with the club through that period, there were only a couple. I thought Kevin Lisby was one, and he was never really a kind of regular first teamer. And the other one was Jonathan Fortune, who came through the academy.
I think Richard Rufus as well. I think Richard Rufus came to the youth academy, and I think he stayed at Charlton the whole of his career. And I think he was a big deal. Richard Rufus always, and I'm just purely staying on his football career here. We don't want to get into what he did after football, I guess. But he always reminds me, I don't know if you guys remember this, the Championship Manager game.
All right, yeah.
Championship, I know there's a massive addiction to Championship Manager. And you're always looking to buy the bargains, the players that are going to be, that have been coded into the game. They're going to just hit the jackpot. And Richard Rufus clearly must have either been touted as a future star of English football,
right,
or one of his friends or family members worked inside the Championship management game to make sure he was seen, because he was always the one you bought because he was just a superstar in terms of the game. So yeah, I think Richard Rufus came through the youth ranks as well. But still, you are right. I mean, some of the good players he had, like Eddie Elds, Danny Mills, Matt Holmes, they were all purchases when they were young players. I mean, very good players, well known. I think maybe you might. I don't know if it's Stefan Paul Konchesky.
Yes.
He come through the youth, or was he bought? I can't remember.
He was at the West Ham Academy, and they released him, and Charlton snapped him up as a trainee. So yeah, you could argue that he came through the ranks, but he wasn't at the Charlton Academy. Yeah, it's interesting you say about Richard Rufus having friends in the Football Manager game, because looking at Wikipedia, every season on Wikipedia, Richard Rufus is mentioned specifically. So whoever did the Wikipedia entries for Charlton has got him. In fairness, they didn't shy away from the post-football career, but he definitely featured quite highly in a lot of Wikipedia.
He absolutely does. I
Yeah.
think that's where I get the idea that there was this sea of youth players having come through the ranks.
Mm.
Because Richard Rufus was mentioned every.
Yeah.
I'd always try to sign Richard Rufus and Louis Enrique because they were the two players that were going to smash it. And then you could play a game as Carlisle United, and you know you're going to win the European Cup in 3 season times.
So Charlton, finally, they do make their glorious ascent to the top tier. And we will talk about how they do that after the break.
Wow. Before we go to the break, Graham, I came prepared with a quiz question for you both.
I love it. So one of the random quiz questions.
Before we go to the break, and we can follow up after the break, so give you some time to think about it. So, which 1980s British sitcom character had the middle name Charlton, named after Charlton Athletic? Do that after the break, so you have some time to think about it?
I shall do on that, and
I shall give that some consideration.
Break. Hi, Graham here. We're just about wrapping up our plans for this current season, but we're already turning our attentions to our next season. If you've been listening, there are some teams you would like us to cover, or would even like to come on and talk about those teams, you can contact us, drop us a line. How do they get hold of us, Jamie?
Well, they can get hold of us by using the social media accounts, X or Blue Sky, where we have the same handles. We've got yourself at Said and Dunn, and myself, Couch Pundito. So Couch Pundito at Blue Sky, and Said and Dunn at Blue Sky, or on the X, aka Twitter equivalent.
And you can also get hold of us on Insta, which I think the kids call it these days. What's our handle on that one?
Yes, we're on Instagram, where we're trying to share some of our little videos. So please give us a like, a follow, and keep in touch with our little videos. So we are on Instagram as the Greatest Team Football Podcast, or by far the Greatest Team Football Podcast. Search for either of those and you'll find us. Please follow.
Okay, so welcome back. Jamie, you left us with a little teaser before the break. Give us a reminder of it.
Yeah, a 1980s sitcom character had the middle name Charlton, named after Charlton Athletic. Who was that 1980s sitcom character?
I thought all the Fools and Horses boys were Millwall fans, but I'm going to guess at Rodney Trotter.
Oh, I like that a lot. I was gonna go. Didn't think of it. I was thinking of Robert Lindsay and Citizen Smith.
He was a Fulham fan.
Yeah, he was definitely a Fulham fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, actually, that's ringing a bell now.
Totally popular front, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, there we go.
Not to be confused with the People's Popular Front.
Exactly, yeah.
Go on, Jamie.
Yeah, you misery, Graham. Stu's nailed it. He's got it. It is.
Is it?
Yeah, Rodney Charlton Trotter.
Blimey.
Charlton Athletic. But you're all right, Stu. I always remember only Fools and Horses being a Millwall. I mean, Grant was definitely a Millwall fan, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He made a few references about Millwall ever getting to the front, which they did in 2004.
Indeed. Friend of mine, we're going off on a bit of a tangent actually, but I am. Friend of mine's writing a book. It's one of these sort of, life works. He's been writing it for years, but it's references to football in popular culture. And one fact he came out with that I thought was fantastic is there's an episode of Porridge where Fletcher wangles himself a weekend at home on the premise that his wife is about to leave him. So they give him a weekend's sort of compassionate leave to go home. And he goes to watch a football match. And he watches Leighton Orient versus Mansfield Town. And it's just that little detail is great. Yeah.
That is good. That is a good
Yeah, that is good.
So yes, we've been talking about Alan Curbishley and the Charlton side, and they are, until 1997, they are trying their best to get out of the second tier. Now, the playoffs, they had narrowly they'd lost in the semi-final a couple of years before, but 1997 and 98, I think it is, they do go up in what is regularly described as one of the greatest games ever. Now, I know you had a bit of incredulity about this, Jamie, but the playoff final against Sunderland is an incredible game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the multi-million-pound game, and it was fantastic. And in fairness, in all playoff games in the EFL, this one has produced the most goals ever. So there's never been 8 goals. 7 is the second highest tally. But no, I'm not saying there are better football matches. It's how you define it's how you define a great team. I mean, what idiots would put a podcast together to try to, rank football teams in a scale of greatness? It's like, how do you do it? It's an impossible thing to do. Maybe there's a gap in the market for the greatest game football podcast, and we could talk about those. It's a brilliant game, but I mean, it's just one of those moments where, because it twos and throws as well. I mean, the rhythm to the game is fantastic, and there's some wonderful goals in it as well. And played in front of a packed Wembley with 2 pretty big football clubs playing outside the top tier as well. It's a great game, and thank you for reminding me that maybe I had a bit of scorn that this was the greatest game ever played. It's a very good game. It's up there, but how do you quantify that?
Stu, do you remember that game?
I do remember it. Yeah, I don't remember the detail of it, but I certainly remember the kind of the overall game. And I would guess Clive Mendonca would describe it as the greatest game of all time, because he scored a hat trick and he scored the winning penalty, didn't he? He certainly scored a penalty. And I for some reason I remember I was driving down the M40 listening to it on the car radio. I think having just been to see my in-laws.
Yeah, so this game finishes 4-4. Clive Mendonca hat trick. Sunderland, Quinn and Phillips. It is a great result. They go through on penalties in the end. So I was really watching this game, and the penalties are. I mean, I'm going to say. I mean, obviously it's almost 30 years ago, but they are from a different era, and you suddenly realise how penalty taking technique has totally changed, because without fail, they all kind of walk back 10 paces and then steam in like Bob Willis as fast as they can. It's actually massive run up and smash it. None of this hop and a skip and a one step and a wait and a whatever. They just all take these massive run ups. Huge, almost out of shot.
I'm in favour of that. I mean, all this hopping and skipping, that's not a proper penalty. You need to put your laces through a penalty, in my opinion. I do find it enormously amusing nowadays, and it increasingly happens where the penalty taker does all this sort of 1 step, 2 step, tries to give the keeper the eyes, and then literally just passes it straight down the middle. Very funny.
Paul Pogba taking the penalty, who does 433 tiny baby steps before he finally lets the goalkeeper save it. But great, you're absolutely right. Of the 14, I mean, we should talk about the game as well, because it is a great game, and we should. I mean, especially Niall Quinn. We should talk about his 2 goals, and his first one in particular. We should come back to that. On the penalties, of the 14 penalties, 13 of them are absolutely. They've put the laces through it, as you said, Stu. They're levered in. They're like power blasters. There isn't a weakness there. It's ironic that Michael Gray ends up taking the weakest penalty, and that's the only one that's saved.
Right.
Where do they get the energy from? They've played a 46-game league season at the end of the season. They've come through a 2-legged semi-final. They've gone to added time in a classic 4-4 game at Wembley, and they've still got the energy to sprint, as you say, Graham, like Bob Willis.
Yeah, it's like a collection of 14 Kevin Pressman penalty kicks, isn't it? Kevin Pressman, who obviously took one for Sheffield Wednesday and essentially took it as a goal kick. Just as an absolute, if you haven't seen that penalty,
I haven't seen that.
I cannot recommend it enough.
Yeah.
It's the same run up, flat. Those Quinn goals are fantastic. The first header is the irony is he actually misses probably an easier chance out of it. He could have had a hat trick himself, but his first header is just ludicrously good.
Yeah, I mean the corner pings in, and he's run right across the edge of the box to the corner of what's the 6-yard box, and he's just power headed and angled it in, and the bottom near post. It's fantastic. And then what does he do, Graham? I hope our man Jamie's listening from South Coast right now. He does the Mick Shannon.
Yes, he does. He does.
With the Mick Shannon. Hasn't been seen since Mick Shannon. But there he is, Niall Quinn. I mean, he looks like a windmill as well. He's that large. He wheels away with the one-arm windmill. It's fantastic.
Yeah,
he was a great. Niall Quinn, I think, was actually slightly underrated as a player because he was a very, very good player, and he was sort of slightly on the fringes at Arsenal, but you know, he went on to Sunderland, and you know, he did really, really well, and I thought he was great. He was a bit, you know, he was kind of a forerunner. He was slightly more coordinated version of Peter Crouch, wasn't he?
Yeah. Do you think Niall Quinn is the original great touch for a big man reference? Do you reckon that's where it was born from?
Could be.
He came along as this pretty useful footballer that was close to 8'4" tall.
Yeah, gangly. Yeah,
with his feet.
I suppose you had these two forces of nature going there, where you had Sunderland with this incredible strike force, but Charlton, who had gone 9 games without conceding a goal. So you have this whole kind of narrative bonus that the commentators like to use, and obviously there were 2 that went on with that. One is that Charlton hadn't conceded a goal for 9 games and conceded 4 in 1 game, and still get through. And the other is that Clive Mendonca was a Sunderland fan, supposedly.
Yeah, he was. So,
Mendonca was an excellent bit of business for them. Actually, it's his goals that get them through that season. They picked him up pretty much for some of the money. I think it was $750,000 or so they spent on Mendonca, the money from the Lee Bowyer sale, and that is all. I think that is the final piece of the jigsaw to get them up. They do have pretty solid defensive unit at that stage, and it's interesting. I mean, throughout that whole period, Mendonca scores a lot of goals. Even when they're in the Premier League, that there's not a lot of obvious goal scorers until Darren Bent appears and everything. And I'm not sure that there were ever that many goals in this Charlton side.
No, they kind of seemed to spread them around a bit, didn't they? They didn't have a prolific scorer. Ironically, when they got up and then they went back down, didn't they? And Andy Hunt, yes, seemed to be the man who was banging him in from. And I don't know what happened to Mendonca, because he obviously did go up with them. He played in the season when they were in the top flight, 98, 99. They went straight back down, and I don't know if he left then.
He gets injured in that in that promotion-winning season. Only plays 2 or 3 games in that, and that's where Andy Hunt comes to the fore. Mendonca is interesting because he scores. So in Charlton's first game in the Premier League, or first home game, I think they draw the first game, and then their first home game, they win 5-0, and Mendonca scores a hat trick again, which is a fantastic little run, isn't it?
Against Birmingham, apparently. Yeah.
His goals in 2 of his goals in particular in this playoff final that finishes 4-4. I mean, fantastic technical ability. I mean, incredible technician. I think it's his first one. The ball is headed into him, and he controls it, and he's got the defender on his back, and he turns in the same space. He almost contorts his body, turns the ball. He doesn't do anything with the ball other than contorts his body around the ball, and then just kind of feeds it into the space, but drops his shoulder to send the defender the wrong way, and then he just calmly places it into the net. And I think it might be his second or his third, I can't remember, where he's controlled the ball outside the area, and it's kind of bobbled up into a strange space where the ball's around about his midriff, and he reads it so well because he hangs out his foot knowing where the bounce is going to come, and then just puts enough pressure as the bounce comes up almost a reverse half volley to push the ball smoothly into his path and play the shot. I mean, technically, they're fantastic goals, and it was a golden period for Mendonca as well. Because you're right, Greg, he actually went on and he did all right in his short Premier League spell, because he does suffer a series of injuries, and unfortunately by 2002, he's out of the game. Works in Sunderland apparently now. Works in the Nissan plant, car factory. Yeah, apparently.
Blimey.
That's what the internet tells me, so it must be true.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. So that first season, that Charlton actually start really strongly in that first season in the top division, but they don't keep the momentum going, and they do end up relegated the last game of the season. And again, you look at the patience, and there is, if a manager has been in charge for as long as Curbishley's reign is, you do need to have the backing of the fans, of the club, of the board, whoever it is, and there's real patience there, because they put their faith back in Curbishley to bring them straight back up, and he does, in fact, and they go up the following season as champions, as you say, with Andy Hunt getting a bag full of goals. The next time they make it to the Premier League, it's a different story, because now when Charlton get there, they are remarkably comfortable in that division, aren't they?
Mm. And I think, as you say about the consistency, they obviously fought against the knee-jerk reaction of getting rid of Curbishley. And I think he had the core of the team that had been up 2 seasons before, or got up 2 seasons before, was still there. So the likes of Richard Rufus, who we've already mentioned, Mark Kinsella, who was a kind of consistent player then, Andy Hunt, Mendonca, John Robinson.
Yes.
I think you mentioned Eddie Youds right at the beginning, Jamie. So they had a good sort of, quality group of players who now had that experience under their belt. And they added a couple of players in, like Graham Stewart, who was a very experienced Premier League player with Chelsea and Everton. They brought in Dean Kiley in goal, who actually wasn't experienced in the top flight, but had a truckload of games in the lower divisions for the likes of York City and Bury, clearly specialising in teams with very short names. Dean Kiley let himself down with Charlton, but should have gone a Hull, really, shouldn't he? But they had, I think what I'm trying to say is they had a core of players that had been there before. They added some experience. They brought a few new players in, and they also had the likes of Parker and Kevin Nisbey and Konchesky kind of on the peripheral of the squad. So when they came back, they were much better positioned to survive.
They're also managing the international market well, because at this particular point, as we discussed with the Chelsea team around this period, we're pretty much in the same period where we were with Chelsea when we were talking about them last week. They did it. I mean, Klaus Jensen comes in and midfield. He was always a very mighty player. They bring Mark Fish in. I think Mark Fish had already had a spell at Bolton. I might be on that. Sean Bartlett as well, another South African that they're bringing in. I think there are a couple of Swedes. I think Pringle, Svensson. So they're also looking to invest in the international market as well, as every Premier League football team is doing. They also put in the wonderfully named Danny Shitty.
Yes. Yeah, he spread his favours around a bit, Danny Shittu. He was Millwall and Watford, and was he? I think he was briefly at Forest. But yeah, I kind of think the late 90s, early 2000s is when there was a huge, influx of Scandinavian players into the Premier League. And, as you say, Charlton did very well in spotting the right people. And, they had Pringle, you've already mentioned, Matthias Svensson, and they got a guy called Jonathan Johansson, who went on to play a number of games for them and score, a lot of goals. I think he was one of in that Premier League era, he was one of the highest scoring players for them. But he was actually born in Sweden, but he played for Finland played a number of, I think about over 100 caps he won for Finland. But yeah, they recruited well, and I think they recruited cheaply is probably the best way of putting it. Even when they signed players with decent pedigree, they seem to get good deals.
I think this goes back to what you mentioned earlier as well, Stu, the relationship that Curbishley's clearly got with Richard Murray, the owner or chairman, who's responsible for managing Charlton at the highest level. He just seems a sensible leader. He always seemed a sensible chairman, as they would have been called. And I think because Curbishley's got a good relationship with him, and they clearly have a vision where Curbishley is thinking, I can keep this team in the top league, but you need to back me in the right ways. And I think that unity between them clearly paid off. I don't know whether that was the case. It just feels like that was the case.
Yeah, and a couple of players we haven't mentioned actually was another European recruit was Radostan Kishishev, who I think went on to be a Bulgarian. Played at the Euro '96 and the World Cup in '98 for Bulgaria, and won a lot of caps. I think he won about 80 odd caps for Bulgaria, and he became a massive favourite at Charlton. Started off as a fullback and then got moved into a defensive midfield role, and actually played quite a pivotal role throughout their Premier League stay. And another one that we haven't mentioned, he joined in the season that they went down from the Premier for the first time, is Chris Powell.
Chris Powell, of course, yes.
Wow, beautiful player he was.
Charlton legend. And, and went on to become an aged debutant for England under Sven.
But that was that glorious period, wasn't it, where when Sven came in and said, I've got... apparently there are no left backs, so I found three. I think was Konchesky one as well.
Well, that was what was slightly unfortunate for Konchesky. It was two of the three left backs that Sven deemed as the best in England were him and Chris Powell. And Chris Powell was holding the left back position for Charlton. So Konchesky, funny enough, because he was a left back, but he played more games in midfield for Charlton than he played at left back, which I think is one of the reasons he ended up leaving, because he couldn't command the first choice of his first position.
And Chris Powell, actually, he does, when I think about players that sort of epitomise this team and this era, Chris Powell does sort of fit the bill, because I don't mean this to sound as kind of unfair or sweeping as it is, but just absolutely solid.
Yeah,
everything that Chris Powell was probably one of the most reliable fullbacks you could get.
Yeah,
and Charlton throughout this period. Now there would have been highs, but there were no real scrapes of relegation. It was relatively controlled.
Yeah, until the season they went down, they never looked like going down, and they were very, very consistent, and Chris Powell was kind of a consistent presence pretty much throughout. What I didn't realise is he actually left and came back at one point. He went to West Ham for a season and then came back, and then he did it again. He went to Watford and then came back, and also I used to see Chris Powell not on a semi-regular basis, because my son played in the Epsom and Ewell youth league, and one of Chris Powell's kids presumably also played there, because whenever we played Stuart Athletic, Chris Powell was usually on the touchline cheering them on. And,
fantastic!
And always seemed like a gentleman. And he obviously kind of bringing the televisional thing back into play. He appeared quite regularly in Ted Lasso as one of the pundits. I don't know if you've seen Ted Lasso, but
fantastic.
Chris Powell was one of the pundits. Yeah, top man. And of course, he managed Charlton later. He managed them to. He was the last man, I think, pre the most recent Nathan Jones, to manage Charlton to promotion.
When you think about, this is probably the thing that stands out about this Curbishley era, is that either side of it, and I exclude the Lenny Lawrence, so there's Lenny Lawrence bit, but Charlton have largely been a sort of basket case run club, haven't they? There's no sign that other than this period. I mean, they were run so bizarrely that they bought for the year as a second tier side and have to get kicked out of their ground, and then since then they've been equally badly run until recent. I think the ownership's changed now.
Yeah,
I couldn't help but resist it, but they in the period of the year since Curbishley left, Charlton have had 19 managers. So.
Yeah.
19 permanent managers since Alan Curbishley left in 2006. So, and as you said, Stu, 3 of them were in the next season.
So in 24 years, they had 2 managers essentially, and then in the subsequent 22 years, they've had 19. Just doesn't make any sense at all, does it really? And actually, some interesting names in there. So Lee Bowyer came back, didn't he?
Yeah.
Russell Slade, who's been around. Michael Appleton, who seems to have managed pretty much every lower division side, including Oxford United.
He's universally, I mean, he's loved at Oxford, but universally hated at Charlton. They absolutely hated him.
Yeah. And they had Phil Parkinson, who's currently obviously lording it up at Wrexham with the Hollywood chaps. He was at Charlton for a bit, wasn't he? But none of them managed to bring any success.
No.
Challenging Curbishley's success at all, did they? You know.
But I mean, that's the thing with this Charlton team. That's the nub of this Charlton team. They have 7, 8 years, or at least 7 years of what feels like stability in the Premier League, and they also challenge. I think was it 03-04? They're in the top 4 for a lot of the season and narrowly miss out on a European place. And I think they finished.
So they're 7th. They finished 7th that year.
But what Curbishley is doing, he's changing the culture of the fan. The Charlton fan, like all football fans, once you get used to something, it becomes the norm. And what he's doing, he's keeping Charlton in the Premier League, but he's punching way above the weight. And it's in the expectation of the fan. And that's where I think the weight of opinion is growing, that maybe Curbishley is not the right guy to take us where we need to be. He's spooked these fans so much. And I get, we've all been there. He's changed the culture, the DNA in terms of what Charlton Athletic see themselves as. And now they're a Champions League chasing football team. And is Curbishley the right man to take us into that next level?
Yeah, I don't. I'm not a Charlton supporter, so I can't say what the mood was like then. I don't get that sense, though, Jamie. I don't get the sense there was, a kind of groundswell of feeling that we need someone other than Curbishley to take us any further. But I don't know. I don't know whether the Charlton fans began to think that way. I don't get that impression. Curbishley sort of stepped away of his own accord, didn't he? There was no pressure on him to go. And if you look at, the kind of the way he managed the team through that period, I was kind of surprised when I was looking into it, because I thought you'd be able to find the definitive Charlton Athletic 11. And that was very difficult to do because it was constantly changing. And every season he was, not necessarily kind of signing loads of players, but just bringing in and moving around. And one season, one guy would be on the bench and then he'd be back in and so on. But they had, some consistent players like Kishishev, we've already mentioned, Chris Powell, Jensen, you mentioned, Jamie. And he seemed to have this ability to kind of get central midfield players who were very, very classy. So like Scott Parker, we already mentioned, came through the ranks. Graham Stewart, they signed, I think, from Everton. And then you had Danny Murphy join from Liverpool, So, and Murphy joined with a number of England caps and a number of cup winners, medals, and so on and so forth. So at that point, Charlton were able to punch that weight. They could lure players from that level into the club, and that was because Curbishley had created this kind of, mentality and the fact that they were there amongst the big boys and they deserved to be.
It is brilliant recruitment. I know we touched on Scott Parker, and he's come through he came through the youth ranks, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think. An incredible talent, and I mean, he was always destined for talent. He was in, as you remember, that McDonald's advert in the 1980s as a youngster. I mean, he must have been like 11 or 12 years old doing EPOPs, and you're kind of thinking, well, that kid's never going to go away. That's Scott Parker. What a great player. And you mentioned, Danny Murphy, and we've talked about Danny Murphy previously when we've done the Fulham podcast. What a fantastic footballer, Danny Murphy.
Great player, yeah.
Exciting and, an absolute nightmare for Manchester United as well in terms of scoring free kicks. But also another player that came towards the end of this Charlton spell in that midfield is Matt Holland.
Yeah.
And another fantastic footballer. The recruitment just seems to be, I mean, whether it's down to Curbishley or Curbishley and his team of scouts, but they are picking fantastic, talented, low key as well when they come to Charlton as well. For their talent, they don't seem to carry the profile. They go on and create the profile through their time at Charlton. But an incredible talent spotting exercise is going on at Charlton Athletic with Charlton at this time.
I think they had a scout permanently positioned at Portman Road, Ipswich, because the number of players they signed from Ipswich is fairly remarkable. So Matt Holland was signed from Ipswich, and my memory of Matt Holland at Charlton was this kind of fresh-faced youngster. But actually, he had 250 games under his belt at Ipswich before he joined them, He was 29 when he joined Charlton. So, he played a lot of games for Ipswich then. They also got, who else they get? Herman Haridason, the centre-back. He came from Ipswich. Yeah. And they got him for 800,000, which apparently was Ipswich were, at the point they signed him, Ipswich were in administration. So they managed to get him at a knockdown price, which was obviously a bit of a result. Both of the Bents had previously been, Darren Bent they signed from Ipswich, and then Marcus Bent had previously been at Ipswich, but they signed him from Everton. Dean Kiley had been on loan at Ipswich. Mark Fish went on loan to Ipswich from Charlton. And Darren Ambrose, who was one of the later, he also went on to play for Ipswich on loan. So clearly there was some sort of, link going on there.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, their chief scout obviously lived in Lowestoft or somewhere like that.
It really shows the job Curbishley did in terms of bringing essentially. They did have one or two. I mean, obviously Darren Bent was a top player, Scott Parker and so forth. But for the most part, he's actually he's seen something in journeyman footballers, brought them in, and it's all about the spirit. And actually, he's, I think Charlton did it in quite a non-showy way. So it wasn't all about It's the opposite to a Wimbledon story where it's kind of look at us with the crazy gang or with the whatever. The football, I think this says everything about it. Is I don't remember, I couldn't particularly tell you what Curbishley's football style was like even. But it wasn't all, he wasn't like a disciple of John Beck's long ball stuff. It was, the football was pretty good. They were just really organised.
Yeah, and they he had an ability to spot players, I think, probably that suited the system. So good players, but not necessarily star players. And, a couple that we haven't mentioned, Jason Ewell, they signed from Wimbledon. And he banged in a lot of goals for Charlton over the period. He left as soon as Dowie took over, he left. But another one we haven't mentioned who's actually, along with Chris Powell, holds the joint highest number of Premier League appearances for Charlton, is Luke Young, the fullback.
Another quality fullback.
Yeah. And so Luke Young and Chris Powell both played 187 games for Charlton in the Premier League, which is the highest. And they were left back and right back. And Young was enormously consistent, and he won 5 caps for England whilst he was at Charlton, actually. So and then went on post his Charlton career to play for Middlesbrough and Aston Villa and sustain a pretty long term career. So they certainly had the ability, I think, to recognise players that would work within the environment. And occasionally they signed the odd maverick. So and I'd completely forgotten about this, but the 03-04 season they had Paolo Di Canio.
This completely passed me by.
Yeah.
This goes back to your point, Graham, about they picked up the journeyman. And I think that's what Curbishley's eye was, because not only did they sign Di Canio, he was there for a short spell. They had Jesper Blomqvist. Francis Jeffers. So
Jeffers.
Curbishley was scooping up some of the more established players as well, and then bringing them into this squad and combining it and sustaining Premier League football along with it.
I mean, Di Canio, remarkable character, and I think you'd struggle to find a football fan who didn't have an admiration, or maybe a secret admiration for Di Canio. But any man who can push over a referee called Paul Alcock is, just you can't write that kind of stuff. And he the one season he was there, he scored 4 goals for Charlton, all of them from the penalty spot.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. One of them was from a rebound, in fairness, but he scored a Panenka against Arsenal, and who better a team to score a Panenka against?
So Charlton, Curbishley does, and you're right, Stuart. I think it's Curbishley's decision to go. I think he's been in charge. It's 2006, and he's been in charge 15 years. 11 of them in sole charge. So it does kind of feel like it's time for things to move on. But things don't really work out either for Alan Curbishley or Charlton. We talked about Charlton. Charlton do get in. Dowie takes over the following season. And that doesn't go well. And I think Les Reed comes in, and Pardew can't quite keep them up by the end. And so Charlton relegated and never to return. Maybe not never.
Despite 19 different managers. Yeah.
Despite 19 different managers.
Yeah.
It's they've never reached those high points again. And then you have this really curious career that Alan Curbishley goes on, which of course he sort of picks up his dream job, which is kind of the West Ham job, and that's where he played most of his career. He gets that, I think, in...
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I've always thought Alan Curbishley played most of his career at West Ham, but he didn't, actually. The club he played the most games for was Birmingham City.
That's crazy.
Early on.
He started at West Ham.
Yeah.
Played 85 games in 4 years. He then went to Birmingham, played 130. Then went to Villa, 36. Charlton, 63. Brighton, 116. Then back to Charlton. So actually, he played most games for Birmingham, second for Brighton, and West Ham were the third team in terms of his number of appearances. But I've always had, Curbishley at West Ham. That's kind of,
Yeah, in my mind, he played something like 300 games for them.
Yeah. No, he didn't.
Did a couple of seasons. Yeah, that's incredible. He takes over at West Ham halfway through the following season, keeps them up. Seems to be going quite well. Guides, I think, West Ham to 10th or something the following season. And then amid some kind of boardroom challenges and sales of players, he leaves off the first 2 games of the next season, and then is involved in a kind of legal wrangle with West Ham for pretty much lasts a year or so. And at this point, I think he is about 50 or 51 when he leaves. the West Ham job. So he's still young as a football manager, and at this point, it's all, and we should sort of point out, actually, before he goes to that West Ham job, he is interviewed for the England manager's job, isn't he, when he's at Charlton last year? So when Steve McLaren gets the job, and when there's this, so when Sven has gone, and the decision is we need to have an English coach, whoever it is, and Alan Curbishley is obviously among the leading lights there, but he misses out on that job as McLaren gets it, then goes to West Ham, doesn't go well there. But then you have this extraordinary period where you're waiting for Curbishley to come back into the game, and he just doesn't.
He actually did reappear at Fulham briefly. He was appointed technical director, and this was in the very, very strange Fulham season where we had Martin Jol as a manager, and he was then replaced by the Dutch fella whose name I can't actually remember. Moonestein, that's it, Moonestein, yeah. And I think it was when Moonestein was in charge that Curbishley was appointed as technical director. But then in February, the following February, along came a new broom by the name of Felix Magath, who swept all before him and took Fulham down in a blaze of glory. And Curbishley was unfortunately a victim of the Magath era. So, and I don't know what he did after that, in fairness. But
I think he doesn't he turn back up. He does turn back up in helping Kit Simons out as well, I think.
Okay, yeah, no, fair
I think there's a small bit, but I'm not sure what the role is at that point. But it is absolutely surreal. It's difficult to think of another manager who. Oh, go on, Jamie.
You're right. It is difficult, and I kind of like the idea of trying to find a comparison, because Curbishley does feel unique, and he is unique. He's managed the same club for 15, 16 years. He's had a brief spell at West Ham. So he's only been in the game for 20 years as a manager. He's out of it in his early 50s. So, 2 clubs maximum. So he feels unique. And I kind of thought, is this unique? And it is. The only manager I could find that in the English game, that is comparable, even games and win ratio as well, to Alan Curbishley, is John Lyall at West Ham.
All right, yeah.
John Lyall managed West Ham from 74 to 89. He had a brief spell at Ipswich after that. When Ipswich were in the Premier League, the start of the Premier League, John Lyall was a Premier League manager. Original 22 teams that formed the Premier League, John Lyall was in that.
That's incredible.
John Lyall was in the game for about 20 years, 2 clubs, was out the game in his early 50s, managed at top flight level for West Ham around about 750 games, win ratio around about 39%. Curbishley's the same, 700 games, win ratio 38%. But he was the only comparison I can find. And that just shows you how unique it is for an individual, a football manager, to be in the game so long at one club and then never come back into it.
Yeah, I'm racking my brains to think of other comparables, and I can't, to be honest.
I read a couple of interviews about it, and obviously he's quite often asked about how come he didn't come back to manage other teams. And I think he basically seems to say that it took him about a year or so to settle with West Ham, and that kind of left it out of that. And then he thought it should be a Premier League club coming in for him, and it was Championship clubs coming in for him. And so, it is partly him being picky, and partly, it might be. I wonder if at that stage, we're talking about 08, 09, 2010. It's the kind of are things already moving away from English managers? Is it already? Is that part of the thing that he's just become unfashionable?
Probably. There might be an element of that. I mean, because he claimed constructive dismissal against West Ham, didn't he? So I imagine that left a bit of a nasty taste and probably, didn't make him overly inclined to jump straight back in. But it is odd that no clubs would have wanted him, because he had a great track record, really, didn't he, at a certain level of club.
Do you know what? It could be, this is pure speculation, it could just be lifestyle. He's been in football since he was a teenager. That's, 30, almost 40 years inside football. In his early 50s, when he's done with it, he's probably got enough money that he doesn't need to work again. Yeah. And he may have decided that I'm just going to enjoy the rest of my life, with my family, doing the things that I enjoy. It could have been a lifestyle choice. You never know. I know it's an unusual thing for football managers to do, because they just seem to want to go on and go on. Maybe Curbishley decided that, football's been good to me. I'm going to look after myself and enjoy the rest of my life. Who knows? Could be a lifestyle decision.
Yeah, not unlike Andrew Ridgely of Wham, in fairness, who, George Michael went on, pursuing the glory, and Andrew just retired to Cornwall with his Formula Ford cars and enjoyed a happy life.
The manager does, not in similarity, but in terms of managers who maybe kind of were waiting for the perfect job, or didn't want to take a job that maybe they just didn't need the hassle for, which I think that was part of the thing. I think Curbishley didn't want to work for. I think he was possibly quite close. He was to Newcastle, and I think he was talking to Mike Ashley. But again, you can maybe see why he didn't go for that.
Yeah.
But the person it does occur to me is quite simple. Is George Graham, who has a very surreal management arc of Arsenal, unheralded success, and then he
started off with Millwall, as we know.
I knew they were full club, so it's Millwall, does really well there.
Yeah,
great track record, gets himself the Arsenal job, unbelievable success at Arsenal, goes to Leeds, not brilliant, and obviously he left Arsenal under a bit of a cloud. And then he's at Spurs for 3 years.
Yeah.
And then you go from managing Spurs to managing no one. It's a really odd thing. And again, I think at that period it wasn't necessarily that he never wanted to manage again, but maybe you only want the right kind of club. And then once you've waited a couple of years and you turn something down, then the offers just don't come in.
I guess it's a difficult one for managers, though, isn't it? Because you kind of got, do you wait for the big opportunity to present itself, as maybe Curbishley did? And I think to an extent, Graham Potter, he kind of was clearly twiddling his thumbs for a bit, and I think he had a few opportunities, and then he went for the West Ham one, which, speaking to a few West Ham fans who are friends of mine, they possibly wish he hadn't gone for that. Or do you kind of just get back on the horse? And I'm kind of thinking the one that always I springs to my mind, who got back on the horse and probably again wishes he waited for a better offer, is A.D. Boothroyd. Do you remember him?
Oh yes.
So he was manager of Watford. He was 34, got them promoted to the Premier League in his first season, was hailed as the next big thing. I think he'd come through the FA coaching ranks and all this kind of stuff. And, got Watford up. They went down. They stuck with him. I think they got to the playoffs the following year and lost. He left the club by mutual consent, as is the way of doing things. And then he joined, quite rapidly, Colchester United. And then went to Northampton Town. And I've no idea what he's now doing. He may be running a burger bar somewhere, but no, that's unfair. But I think, he obviously thought, I want to stay in work, and dropped down a few divisions and never managed to get back up to where he'd been before.
So we should get to ranking this Alan Curbishley team. Alan Curbishley achievement. It's going to be tough here. I don't know. As a reminder, we got 5 categories of greatness, from all-time greats to the top. I don't think that's going to be any issue this time. True greats, our middle category, touch of greatness, edge of greatness, to a blink of greats. Jamie.
This is really, really difficult. I think because we're talking about a football team just surviving in the Premier League and not being threatened by relegation. I mean, there is a blandness to this. They don't win anything other than a championship to get into the Premier League and a playoff final. But the whole story is really about the manager. We've had these conversations before when it's about the individual. We're really ranking Alan Curbishley because Charlton are where they are because of Alan Curbishley. And I think if we were to separate the two, Curbishley would be ranked fairly high. I mean, just to kind of demonstrate this in Premier League terms, Curbishley's still in the top 20 of Premier League managers that have managed games in the Premier League, the most games in the Premier League. He only got surpassed by Eddie Howe and Pep Guardiola this season. It's like 14th in the ever to a manager in the Premier League. So, and he finished in 2008.
Yeah.
And he's still that high up. And a lot of that could be testament to the fact that managers just don't get opportunities these days to have longevity. Graham, I'm really struggling on this one. I think definitely not all-time greats, definitely not true greats. But then after that, I mean, there's a touch of greatness to it, but they don't win anything. I don't even understand how it could be edge of greatness. I'm kind of gravitating towards this is a blinkered greats. I know. Fifth category. I apologise to Charlton Athletic fans. I love this team and I've got a soft spot for Charlton. One of my closest friends who I lost a couple of years ago was a Charlton fan. So they have meaning to me. I'm struggling. I'm really, really struggling with this one. I'm going to start the conversation rolling. I'm going to put them in blinkered greats. Fifth one.
Go on, Stu. What are you thinking?
Yeah, as Jamie's already outlined, it's quite difficult because you're looking at an era rather than a season. You're looking at, the manager rather than the individual players. And if we're comparing them to Liverpool, Real Madrid, all the great teams, then clearly it's a different kind of level. But if you're comparing them to what Charlton Athletic fans would expect and what Charlton Athletic fans have become used to, then this is a great team. This is really great. And so I would go touch of greatness. I think they had touches of greatness and they achieved beyond their individual and collective abilities for quite a long time. So I'm going to go touch of greatness.
I'm torn. I mean, part of me, obviously, we'll push them up because of the Squeeze Charlton song, Down in the Valley, which I believe exists. So, where do you go with this? Well, it is tough. As you say, Stu, that they are by far and away, this is Charlton's most successful modern day club or modern day era. It feels not putting them in touch of greatness is kind of doing the same disservice that we've treated Alan Curbishley and Charlton with throughout the whole thing, is that it's a bit blasé. But it is unbelievable. I mean, that's the thing that does turn it around for me is that, as you say, Jamie, so there you go, you've got Curbishley, 14th most.
It's incredible.
Most games in the game. And the vast majority of that will have been done managing Charlton. And that's like an incredible achievement, really, when you think about it. And it wasn't that they were skulking around at the bottom of the table, just kind of circling the drain. He managed to turn them into an absolute solid thing. So I think we have to say, I'm going to go with Stu on this. I think I'm going to go touch of greatness.
Your phrase "circling the drain" has just triggered something, because although touch of greatness, I stick with touch of greatness. What we haven't mentioned is Charlton's ability to fall away at the end of the season, which they did consistently.
Yeah,
Yes,
Yeah, I was looking at it, and with 10 games to go in each of their Premier League seasons, with 10 games to go, they never improved on their position. So with 10 games to go in 2001, they were 8th. They finished 9th. More dramatic drops in 2003. With 10 games to go, they were 6th. They finished 12th. 2004, they were 4th with 10 games to go. They finished 7th.
That was the year, wasn't it?
Yeah. 2002, 2003, they managed to gain 4 points from their last 10 games. So I'm tempted to revise my view on the touch of greatness, edge of greatness. They were on the edge of greatness, and then they just kind of fell away.
Yeah, I know. As soon as I said blink of greats, I regretted it straight away, and I kind of wanted to come back and say, no, I mean edge, because I've made a mistake. I'm comfortable with touch, but she makes a good point, because
It could have been so much better.
It could have been, do you know, this is I think we're in unprecedented territory here, because I think you have Stuart's created this narrative, which absolutely they're ready to touch greatness, but
they didn't quite touch it.
Yeah. So let's restart. It is. I'm gonna chuck it completely out. I'm gonna say Charlton Athletic, Curbishley, edge of greatness. Look at what they could have won.
Yeah.
That is a great stat. I did mean to mention it's most obvious in the season they flirted with getting into Europe, but it is a common theme throughout their period there.
They never improved on their position from 10 games out. They always dropped away.
I'm going to link this back to my idea that this is Curbishley and lifestyle. I think by March time he's
on the beach.
I've done my job. I'll kick back. I'll go play some golf. I'll enjoy family time. There's no danger of us going down. I think this is genius from Curbishley. He's just managing expectations sensibly and keeping his life as simple as possible. That would be.
I've got a Matt Holland fact that I didn't manage to get in, and this wouldn't have applied to the Premier League era because the team I'm referring to never played in the Premier League. But apparently, Matt Holland is red-green colourblind. And the only time it proved to be an issue was when they played Plymouth, because he had great difficulty distinguishing between the red shirts of Charlton and the green shirts of Plymouth.
It's great. And as we know, Graham, no team in the Premier League has ever played in green.
Exactly.
Never. Green is an unlucky colour. I mean, as we're just going down random stuff as well, I mean, why don't we just throw in nicknames? Charlton have 3 nicknames. I mean, it's greedy, isn't it? I mean,
so the Addicts.
It's a strange thing in English football, but Charlton have. I didn't know they were called the Robins, and so I know Charlton as the Addicts and occasionally the Valiants as well, right?
Yes, the Valiant. Yeah.
But apparently they're the Robins. I always thought that was Bristol City. I mean, these nicknames are super confusing.
But who said it was the Robins? Was it the commentator on telly? Because I think
they were playing the song, and then it referred to that Charlton are known as Robins. And now, you got your phone out, you look it up because you don't believe it, and I get the first result, and that's confirmation. I don't need to do any more beyond that point. That's enough for me.
So what's your guys' take on the Addicts? Where does that come from?
Yeah, that is weird.
My friend Mike, who's actually quite enthusiastic about listening to these podcasts, and I told him I was doing one on Charlton. He said, "Oh, you must get in.
What?
You must get in. Why they're called the Addicts? Because he's an Everton fan, Mike. But he when his kids were born, he was living in Beckenham, so he took his kids to Charlton. So he's got a bit of a Charlton affiliation. And he said they're called the Addicts because the local fishmonger used to supply the club with fish and chips, and the South London dialect, haddock.
Haddock.
Yeah.
Sounds like addict. And so I thought that sounds very implausible. So I googled it, and apparently that has some credibility. Local fishmonger Arthur Bryan supplied the club with haddock and chips. Players would often eat haddock after the matches. Bryan was known to carry a haddock on a stick to advertise his shop. It sounds very plausible. I find that a slightly disappointing explanation, really.
Excellent. Lovely little factoid. Excellent. Okay, well, we should wrap it up there. Stu, thanks as ever for helping us out on our London beat.
Thanks, guys. Enjoyed it very much, as always. So great to see you both.
Excellent. Good stuff, Jamie. Thank you as ever.
Yeah, thank you, Graham and Stu. Absolutely fantastic. I think when we start season 4 late summer, we probably need to think about a Crystal Palace team to talk about.
Terry Venables' team in the 80s. I love that idea.
I do. But, I mean, Right and Bright couple.
All right, Bright.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Yes, that's not bad. Excellent. Good stuff, Jamie. We will be back next week. We are going, we're doing a genuine classic. We're doing Italia 90 next week. So that's definitely one to listen out to. So catch up with us then.